The last presentation in this session will be given by James Ray, also known as JR, who's Executive Officer for Translational Medicine. JR received his PhD in pharmacology from Georgetown, did his postdoc training with Mark Lipman at Georgetown, came to the University of Michigan in 2001, and has been a part of SWOG Executive Officer, I believe, for 4 years, if I'm correct.
4 years. Thank you. Wow, these were absolutely excellent talks this afternoon. It's a bit of, it's hard to follow these talks today. And mine on doing translational medicine is goes along with the session, but hopefully I can, well, I'm not going to be able to follow the talks we had today. So I'll do the best I can. So I'm James Ray. As I mentioned, I'm the executive officer. I started about 4 years ago when Dr. Baker asked me to step in. And so far, Chuck Blanke hasn't got around to firing me. Well, so far, yeah. Actually, I have been fired, and then I get rehired, thanks to my friends out there in the audience. But for me, just a little background, I've been doing translational medicine. I have a lab at the University of Michigan, and it's been a wonderful experience for me because I've learned so much. And what the role is, and I guess what I'm trying to communicate today overall is that SWOG is committed to doing translational medicine, and there's a core group of individuals here that are committed to that, and we're there to help you. And my job here in SWOG, I do take it seriously, and I am here to help and answer questions for people that are interested in doing translational medicine and their clinical protocols, as well as doing retrospective studies from our banked samples. So with that, my slides. No slide.
Use the mouse.
The mouse? Forward. There we go. Okay, so just a couple of names here for the SWOG leadership on this. Lee Ellis is the Vice Chair of Translational Medicine, and I'm the Executive Officer. For TM, Nathan Erickson, many people know he's the Chief Administrator for SWOG, and Bill Barlow is my go-to person when it comes to the statistics and issues with the bank and translational medicine. And when I came on at the time, 4 years ago, there was a process in SWOG of consolidating the biobanks, which were spread out through the U.S., and that has been completed where we've consolidated the banks down to one at Nationwide Children's in Columbus, Ohio. And Nilsa Ramirez is the director of that. Julie is the director of the Leukemia Bank, and Felice is the day-to-day coordinator for the bank. And this has been, there's some pros and cons with consolidating the bank, but overall the process, although it was difficult, it has been to our benefit for our organization, because now we have a much better idea of keeping track of the samples that come in and come out, and assessing their quality, and then how they're distributed and keeping track of when they're being distributed to investigators that are doing translational medicine. So very simply, the goals of translational medicine is to advance our understanding of whether or not drugs work. Is it a good target, and is it a good drug? And in cases of how do we develop drug resistance. And these are the goals. And the ultimate goal of this here is to improve our ability to do disease classification and do testing prognostic and predictive markers. So the goal of the bank is to support our translational medicine goals within SWOG. And the bank's role here is to provide specimens and the storage, proper storage of these specimens to doing translational medicine, i.e. biomarker studies, and to implement best practices in biospecimen sciences. This is one of the things that I've learned. With my own lab at Michigan, I have my own little biobank, and I get samples from clinical investigators from around the world. But I don't follow all the guidelines because I wasn't quite aware of them. And so what has been really great working with Nationwide and banks is learning, how critical it is in preserving these samples and doing proper collection, assessing the quality as they come in. If there's issues with certain sites where the samples that are coming in aren't up to snuff, we can communicate back and make sure that we get as many of the samples as we can, and they'll be usable for future studies. Also, with the bank, there's these issues with trying to centralize some of the assays that are being done for translational medicine. We're all getting, funding is getting harder and harder, and money's getting tight. And so what we're thinking about from the SWOG end is centralizing some of these core capabilities of sample processing, where we can make, we can have the DNA made at the bank, and then we can send it off to all the different investigators that want to use the DNA or RNA for downstream applications. And these are some of the issues that we're trying to work out from a financial end. What's the best way to help our investigators in getting access to these samples and being able to pay for the assays? So when it comes down to getting samples from the biobank, what we start with is what we call writing a translational medicine proposal. And these get submitted to the executive group for discussion and deciding whether or not we should grant the request to get access to the samples. And the first place to start with this is at the SWOG. You can go to the website and get the form. And it's actually very simple. It's 3 to 5 pages. Most of the stuff that we look for is already in the clinical trial protocol, and you just cut and paste into the forms, and then it puts it in a format that then we can assess it for its scientific merit. So the primary study objective, brief justification of the background for looking at a particular biomarker, and the key references on that. What type of eligibility is required for the patient's samples, and then what is the primary hypothesis as far as the clinical endpoints that are done. And then the experimental approach as well, and the expertise of the PIs. This is often very simple as well, because most of the protocols or proposals we see come in, people have already published on this, because what we're dealing with SWOG are these well-annotated clinical samples, and so people have already set up and done the assay development on what we call, these throwaway samples that don't have the clinical outcomes with them that they get from their own pathology centers. So the research, the techniques are often well-defined by the time we get to see these proposals. So in writing the proposal, then, what type of samples do you want? The bank, a lot of them, in the solid tumors or FFPE. And in the old days, we've seen this technology move on where we can do more and more things from FFPE that weren't possible just a few years ago, but the technologies from the genomics side have certainly improved significantly, and there's a lot more that can be done using FFPE samples. A critical question that comes in, and this is something that always gets discussed when we're talking about these and getting access to the samples, is how much is needed. And as I've mentioned, we follow this and we watch how the technology has been evolving, and you can get more and more information out of smaller and smaller samples. And the question always comes down to is how much of that specimen do you require? Because there's only so much there. Once you cut the block down, there gets to be a point where there's nothing left there. So we always want to be very careful of that, because we know that there's always new improved techniques coming down, and we always want to know how much of these specimens do you require for your test versus what do we have banked away, and that becomes part of the discussions on getting access to it. The time points that are required, and any sort of special processing that might be required at the bank before you get the samples yourself, and then shipping instructions. So these are all put into the TM proposal that then we evaluate. The other key issue with the proposal is that we expect when we release samples to do translational medicine that it'll be completed in a timely fashion. And by definition, we expect that for translational medicine, it will be completed within 2 years of receipt of samples. Because we don't want to send samples out to investigators and then they just sit on them and they don't get it done and don't get the publications out of it. You're expected to complete the project in a timely fashion. And then the other thing from the end is you just need to disclose any conflict of interest. And the financial issue is part of the consideration, but we understand this and we're sympathetic to the current state of funding, is that we have investigators that come in and say they have a really good idea, they want to get access to these samples, test a biomarker in a specific setting, but they don't have the funding yet. So they need the letter saying they can get access to the sample so they can go get the funding. And we are aware of that, and that's often what we see with these proposals that come in. We say, yes, this is great. You go get the funding, and you can get the samples, and we guarantee that. So that's part of the consideration when we look at these proposals. So how are the TM proposals reviewed? So it's reviewed for the clinical and scientific merit based on the preliminary data. The statistical considerations are key. This is one of the things that was the great learning experience for me, what I thought I knew about translational medicine before I started this job. I've just what I didn't know is how much statistics is involved in this and how important it is to interact with the statisticians on designing your translational medicine proposals and getting the support of the stats, because it is crucial for figuring out, can you answer the question you're asking based on your statistical power. So the proposals are reviewed first they're reviewed by the disease committee chair, and if there's a translational medicine co-chair in the disease committee, they look at the translational medicine proposal, and when they think it looks great and you've gone through all your checklists, then the proposals get submitted to our SWOG triage. And this is a weekly teleconference that we hold on every Monday. And whoever's proposing this will come on and give a brief presentation. This is your idea. This is what you're thinking. You give a brief discussion of it, and then the executive committee can ask questions, and then it gets voted on. And often, there's discussions about how to improve upon these and to some things that need to be considered. So the process works extremely quickly, and we pride ourselves on having very quick turnaround time in looking at these proposals. And then there's also, which we don't, because of time, we won't go into, once it gets past the SWOG triage, then it gets to, in some situations, we need additional approvals at the NCI levels and at the intergroup. But I think the goal of SWOG and our triage and TM proposals to get that proposal as ready as we can before it, it's your friends look at it first, and then we send it to the NCI, and we like to have a high success rate of getting these proposals through the NCI level. So just briefly, as I mentioned about from the biobank services, because now that we've consolidated at Nationwide's children, is that there's a lot of resources down there, and I want investigators to be aware of that are capable at the Nationwide bank, including pathology review. There's molecular diagnostic tests that can be done. You can get samples, you can get TMAs made if you want those, and central processing of the DNA, RNA, as I've mentioned. So the bank, and we really, I don't think we've tapped into all the capabilities of what the bank has to offer now. And so we're looking forward to engaging with them more on helping us with our translational medicine. So support for the biobank, we have a U24 grant, and basically what this pays for is the running of the bank. The collecting of the samples and storing the samples. After that, for the investigators who want to get access to the samples, you then have to have your own funds to actually do the translational medicine component of that. And so the investigators need to obtain funding for getting the samples. If you need sections cut from the bank, or if you need DNA, RNA made, things like that, you pay for that, and then you get the samples sent to you. And the support for these studies, Ann gave an excellent talk earlier today, and I think that investigators need to be more aware of what's out there for doing this, because SWOG and HOPE, we are committed to doing translational medicine studies. We know we can better predict response to therapy based on these translational medicine biomarkers. And so support for these, as Ann had talked about earlier today, there's also this funny word here, this acronym BIQSFP, which I don't know where this came up. This predates me. But this is the Biomarker Imaging and Quality of Life Studies, where you can get support from NCI to do integral and integrated markers in the clinical studies. Then there's still the investigator-initiated grants, which are the bread and butters for the clinical, for the many of the investigators, and are interested in doing translational medicine. And then, as Ann had mentioned today, the SWOG research support in the HOPE Foundation, and these are the website here links that anybody's interested in it. And then the other thing is from, there's interest in industry and charitable funds that can support this, as well as individuals have their own startup funds as well. And so these can be used for supporting these sort of studies. So that is the getting biobank specimens in a nutshell, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I think the take-home message for my talk today is that, we are here to help you. And you send me an email. If I don't know the answer, there's somebody else who knows the answer, and we can get you the answers as quick as we can. And we will do whatever we can to help you and to get more translational medicine going here in SWOG. Thank you.